Okay, Kelley, we are we are live on Facebook. I want to let you know that. So
I should not say anything silly.
yeah, I don't want you to be like, what? And be like, well, I don't want to say anything I wouldn't want to say on camera.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So yes, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It's 5:58. We start at 6, but I was having a couple of technical difficulties getting our Zoom started tonight, running off of a couple different computers for this evening. You may notice I'm in a different location tonight. I'm actually in my office here at the Dennis Arneal Equality Center tonight. And I'm happy to be here. My name is Morgan Allen White. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm the center director here at the Dennis Arneal Equality Center, home of Oklahomans for Equality. And tonight is Spirit Night, where we have an interfaith conversation on faith and sexuality. And tonight we have with us the Reverend Kelley Becker. Kelley, would you like to?
Yes, I am the senior minister of Disciples Christian Church in Bartlesville, which is about, 45 minutes or so north of Tulsa. And I have been the senior minister here for about 4 years. I come from central Illinois, a little bit south of Chicago. And so our congregation is an open and affirming congregation. And we are growing and excited to be here in Bartlesville. And we think we are exactly what Bartlesville needs.
I love to hear that. Bartlesville is such a amazing city. We have an OKQ chapter in Bartlesville, and they are so strong and wonderful. And they put on Bartlesville Pride every year. And I know y'all are a part of Bartlesville Pride each year.
Yes, and I'm actually on the OKQ Bartlesville board. And we do Pride every year, and our church is also the site for the Pride worship service every year, so we usually celebrate Pride on a Saturday, and on Thursday night, the Thursday night before Pride, we have a worship service here at our church, and it's absolutely one of the most fun, joyful times that we have all year. We look forward to that service every single year.
I think that's such a great exercise in like faith practice is having like interfaith or a Pride faith service. We do an interfaith Pride service during Pride Month as well. We didn't get to do it during this last Pride due to COVID, but
we didn't either.
But I still think getting a bunch of LGBTQ plus people from different walks of life together to celebrate their spiritual paths. I don't know. There's something really special about that to me. Just as a really faithful person who's had a really long journey with faith and sexuality together. I don't know. There's just something really powerful about coming all together to celebrate.
Yeah, I think so too. And I find in my ministry that the things that really give me life are things that are interfaith, that include people, because the way that we understand spirituality at this church is that we are not a community where everybody can recite the same creed or where everybody believes all the same things about God or about anything with regard to faith, really. What we say is that we are a community that is held together by our common purpose in the world. And so the way that we see that common purpose is bringing wholeness to a fragmented world. And so we talk a lot about the ways in which we can be a healing presence in our community. And I frankly think one of the ways that we can be that healing presence is by inviting people into this space that we've worked so hard to make a safe space. And so I really, really love any time that we can invite people from the community here to gather, people who think about things differently and who practice different faith traditions and no faith traditions. We have members of our church who are atheists and lots of different ways of being in the world. And really it's about, you know, that they like what we do in the world and in the community, and they want to be part of it.
You know, I think there's something to be said about actively inviting people in and saying like, you're welcome here and you're welcome in this space, because I think for a lot of LGBTQ plus folks, myself included, we've had kind of a hard time finding a faith home, finding a place that feels comfortable, where we do feel welcome. You know, I left my old church as a young person, as a teenager, because I was asked to leave, you know, and it was really difficult and tragic in my exploration of identity and spirituality, basically, to put it lightly. But when I came back to Oklahoma after college, I really wanted to find a spiritual home and a place to get back into my faith, because I knew innately that I was welcome to be a faithful person, you know. But I struggled a lot with other people of faith, you know.
Right.
Welcome there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you started by saying, you know, you think it's important for faith communities to actively invite people in. And I completely agree with you, but with you know, the comma, but faith communities who do actively invite specifically members of the LGBTQ plus community in have got to be sure that it's really a safe place, because of exactly what you said, because members of the community have been told so many times that they're welcome and that they are safe, only to get into a community to begin to worship there, or to begin to find their way, how they would like to contribute, and be told, oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you can't work with the children, or I'm sorry, you can't be an elder, or, you know. And so in our tradition, we, in order to be called open and affirming in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, you have to, there's a process, and that process ends with a vote. So the congregation must vote to become open and affirming. And the reason for that is that in order for me as a spiritual leader to be able to say, yes, you are safe here, I have to know that the congregation gets it and gets what it means for people to be truly safe and truly welcome.
That is a great lead into really our first official question, which is, to you and to your congregation, what does it mean to be a welcoming congregation? And what specifically does that look like in your church?
So for us, being a welcoming congregation means that people from the LGBTQ community are welcome and invited to fully participate in the life of the church. So members of the LGBTQ plus community are elders in our congregation. They are deacons in our congregation. They are on the church board. They give of their time and their resources in every area of the church. And so that's the first thing. To be truly welcoming is to say, we value every part of you and embrace every part of you and affirm you. And our faith community is not whole without you and your gifts. And so that's the first thing. And then I think making this a safe space to talk about things, to have honest conversations. When we put, I use sermon slides for my sermons sometimes, and when I put slides on the screen that has to do with a family, that we honor all families, and so the graphics and the pictures that we use are all different families that have two dads and two moms and a grandma, and all of that, and I think that makes for a welcoming community when your family is normal, when whatever, and I can't think of another way to say it because I really don't like that word, but when your family is part of this family and is valued and affirmed, and we dedicate families and talk about how God cares about families and our relationships. And so those would be the top two things I would say.
I'm an Episcopalian now. I grew up Baptist, and I'm an Episcopalian now. And
some of my favorite people are Episcopalians.
So one of the things that I like is that it's so ritualistic. But the thing that I like the most is that the rituals are very inclusive of all identities, and I really just enjoyed exploring all the rituals and being a part of that, no matter, if I do it with my wife, with my son, all together, individually. It's just been great to be included in part of it, and to feel like I'm welcome at every level of the church, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. We are the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Each church is congregationally run. And so while we are connected to a regional church and a general church, each church very much has its own ethos. And so some Disciples of Christ churches are a little bit what we would say higher church, and a little bit more formal, perhaps more like an Episcopalian church. And then there is my church that is really a pretty casual. We have a pretty casual service, but the thing across the board, the thing that makes the Christian Church Disciples of Christ churches who they are, is that we have communion every week. And for us, communion is not something that an ordained minister has to be present to bless or to serve, or so members of the congregation can serve each other, and the words that we say around communion can be different. There isn't one set liturgy that you have to abide by. I do communion differently than my colleague who is on staff here, and that's just part of who, the whole idea of loving diversity and loving different understandings of what communion is and what all rituals are. If you asked my congregation, members of my church, what does communion mean to you? You would get as many different answers to that question as there are people. And I love that. I just think, because, I think we ought to be naturally curious about each other and enjoy finding out about what we believe in, and our neighbors' ways of being in the world. And so for me, that's a lot of fun. And so we are, our congregation in general is very comfortable with the whole, we don't all believe the same things, but we don't always think alike, but we love alike.
I love that statement. I love that sentiment. So you're an ally to the community, and so what does really being an ally mean to you, and what does that mean for your congregation?
So to me personally, I mean, to start with, it is always making spaces for LGBTQ voices, and and I think I joke about that all the time because, you know, anytime you ask, you know, preachers, generally, we love to hear ourselves talk. You know, that's for some of us, that's why we became preachers, is we so love to hear ourselves talk. But I really, really believe that members of the LGBTQ community need the space to tell their stories and to be heard, both in the church and outside the church. And so one of the ways in which I've tried to be an ally is to make space for that, to create opportunities for people in the LGBTQ community to lead worship at my church and to be in the pulpit, and then also allyship from a whole congregation standpoint. Certainly our involvement in Pride is part of that, but it is also being a very, very loud, united voice in our community for justice. And so in addition to justice for the LGBTQ plus community, but also justice for the immigrant community and racial justice and all of the ways that those intersect. And so in our life together as a church, we talk a lot about the intersections of those communities and how we as a church can work for justice for people. And, you know, in a town, you know, so here we are in Bartlesville, and we are an open and affirming church, and we are in the vast minority. Our brothers and sisters across town in the Episcopal Church certainly are a welcoming community, and we have a very good relationship with that church. But really, in a lot of ways, that's all in Bartlesville. We have a really small Unitarian community that does a great job of being welcoming as well. But by and large, it has been Disciples that has been the loud voice in this community, and the voice for change. We partner a lot with Phillips 66 and with Conoco Phillips because they have some employee groups that are really, really active in our community. And so we've worked to partner with them. But for us, it is taking a back seat to members of the LGBTQ community in leadership, and being asked and to participate and not insisting on our own way.
I think really one of the greatest lessons that we can learn is to listen, you know, more than we speak, which is, you know, a lesson for everybody, no matter really what their identity is. You know, it's been really critical in developing my leadership skills in this job, but also just in my relationship skills in every single path that I've walked, spiritually, in business, in relationships, in school, everywhere I've gone. It's such a hard thing to learn, because you want to feel like you want to do the most good, but sometimes, you know, it takes that heart to hear everybody out first and not just assume that you automatically know it's going to be the best. Right.
And I think that kind of circles back to, I think there are some faith communities who want very much to do the most good and to be open and welcoming. But sometimes there's a rush to that when the work in the faith community doesn't get done first. Mm-hmm. And so there might be this sense from the leadership, like, yes, we need to do this, let's move forward. But if the people in that faith community are not moving forward with you and not completely behind what's happening, then you end up with this really disjointed message.
Absolutely. And there's no rush to get out there and create the absolute perfect model of being an ally or being, you know, that because the thing is, if somebody comes in and you're not ready yet, then what's going to happen is you're going to accidentally injure them in some way. Do you know what I mean? Spiritually,
Absolutely.
you know, and you
Absolutely.
don't do that because that's not your intention, but it doesn't outweigh the fact that it is going to be what happens.
Right, right. And it's really, really important, especially because we know that there has been so much pain around religion for members of the LGBTQ community. And what I remember saying to my church as we were going through the open and affirming process was, you know, when we were tempted to rush or to skip a step, or, you know, I would say, no, we have to get this right. Like, it has to be right. And if it takes a little bit longer for it to be right, then it takes a little bit longer, but it's got to be right.
Yeah. So why do you feel like it's important to talk about LGBTQ plus identity within the church?
Well, because at the root of our theology is that the family of God is not whole without everyone. And so if we do not talk about how God created people uniquely, but everybody in the image of God, and if we do not teach our young people what that means, and teach our young people to embrace all kinds of different people, then we will never be whole. And by we, I mean like the really big we, because what we believe is that everybody has a place to belong. And regardless of what you believe about the divine, regardless of rituals and traditions, we believe that everybody has a place because God created everybody. And so if we don't talk about the ways in which we are all uniquely wonderful and all uniquely created by a God who loves everybody, then it's really, really easy to lose sight of where we're going. And where we're going is to leave nobody on the outside, for everybody to know that they are loved. And the way that people know that they are loved is by us loving them. And so we have to talk about all that, just like, you know, we talk about people who have different colors of skin, and we talk about people who worship differently. And again, I think it's, you know, it is great to honor that curiosity about each other. And it also goes back to what you were saying about the importance of listening to each other. Like, that's how we learn, is by hearing each other's stories and hearing each other's experiences and believing each other's experiences. And that's important.
I think the coolest thing about spirituality is that within all of us, we have this desire, you know, throughout time, throughout all places, humanity has this desire to look for something bigger than us. And I think I'm really into this author John Hick, who writes about the fifth dimension and all that stuff, and he really has inspired me in my search and my quest to like reconnect with my spirituality and all of that. But I think that what you really touch on is just this thing where no matter how different we are, what brings us all together is that we all have this desire to love and be loved and to seek truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it may manifest itself differently in all of us because we are all so different, and come from different cultures, backgrounds, places, times, all sorts of things. But it all comes back to being capable of love and wanting to be loved. And I just think that spirituality offers so much love for everybody. And I just think that erasing your unique identity and your quest for spirituality is such a negative idea. And so I love that we're able to bring our whole selves into this conversation, especially more recently in the topic of religion. Instead of erasing who you are, it's bringing your whole self to who and making it right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that in that the quest to love and be loved, I think tied really wholly to that is the desire to belong.
Mm-hmm.
And we really can't fully belong somewhere if we can't bring our whole selves to that. You know, I talk with members of the LGBTQ plus community all the time that still that don't feel free to be completely who they are with their family, with their friends, with their coworkers. And some of their experiences that they've talked to me about are that even in their own families, because they can't be who they really are, they don't feel like they belong. And they feel like if they were to come out and be who they really are, they definitely would not belong because they'd be told that they don't belong. And so there's this sort of this connection with the holy that allows us to sort of be naked before God for exactly who we are. And our job as people of God is to embrace people in that safety, you know, to help them to see that the person that you are before God is the person you can be before us, and is the person, and that we're all seeking to be the person we were created to be. And we're all on this journey together. You know, if you've been around the world, you know, much longer than beyond childhood, you know how different we all are as we have more and more experiences in the world. And it's such a lovely and beautiful thing to watch people becoming more fully who they were created to be. And that's the beautiful part about this, being in this journey together, is not only seeing who I'm becoming, but seeing who you're becoming too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what advice would you give to other church leaders? You've kind of touched on some of the things you would kind of give, but looking to make their spaces more affirming. So other churches who want to be more affirming, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I think for me, talking about welcoming members of the LGBTQ community in terms of it being a justice issue. You know, this isn't just, oh, let's welcome all the people because it's the nice thing to do. And it is the nice thing to do, but there's more to it than that. You know, it's a justice issue. And however you understand the sacred spirit or whatever beyond, you know, the being beyond this space and time, there is a sense that God wants, that God's justice is different than human justice, and that as people of God, as people living out our faith, for us to understand that that part of our journey is to work on justice for all people. And so I think, you know, there are so many places in, from a Christian perspective, there are so many places in the Bible that talk about justice and the importance of justice. So there's that piece of it. And that now is the time. You know, when I go to clergy gatherings, I hear a lot about how, you know, these young people today don't want anything to do with the church, or they're leaving the church in droves. And my response to that is that, well, first of all, in some respects, can you blame them? Because they have moved on. You know, I'm 54 years old. My kids are, I have one in his mid-20s and one in his early 30s. And And when they hear of faith communities that struggle to welcome members of the LGBTQ plus community, they have zero patience for it. None. I mean, because our culture is moving on. Our culture, love has already won in a lot of respects. And so it is time, if the church is going to continue to preach and claim to have a message of love, then it's time. It's way past time. And so I encourage, now is the time to be on, well, years and years ago was the time, but now is the time to be on the right side of justice and on the right side of loving our neighbors in ways they can actually feel and understand. And I think listening to what members of the LGBTQ community are saying and be able to hear hard things like, I don't feel safe when you preach this. I don't feel safe when you say this. I don't, this doesn't say welcome to me, and to listen to those hard messages.
When you talked about like the church needing to move forward, it kind of reminded me of I think there's definitely a subculture in certain faith communities of it's cool to be unpopular, it's cool to be disliked, on social media or whatever, and be called out and be canceled or whatever. And I think really the thing that I always ask people to like do the soul searching is like when you're outright telling someone that you can't love them because of who they are, how cool does that really feel, and when you really have, when this is the one thing that you feel like this person can't even come into the fold of your church because they are LGBTQ plus. This is the one sin that's just too much for your church. This is the one thing that is too much out of all of the things, because
Right.
it just seems, I think there's such an interesting turn on how very conservative Christians have tried to market the idea of homophobia and transphobia to younger people, of like, it's cool to be canceled, it's cool to be you know uncool. And I just, I mostly just think it's cool to be kind, and it's cool to be it's cool to be welcoming, and it's a lot easier too. It's a lot
Right.
easier. It's a lot easier to take the time to listen than it is to actively harden your heart to somebody.
Mm-hmm. And to work to harden the hearts of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't believe that. I think God honors all loving, consensual,
Absolutely.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and so what you're talking about, this sort of cancel culture, and we stand up for what you believe in, by golly, and that's cool. And if it's, even if it's spreading vitriol and hate, like, that's cool. Well, it's not. And what I say to people is that I don't believe it's possible to love people and judge people at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we as faith communities were so much about the love that we say we are, then we are going to be so busy loving people that we don't have time to judge them for anything. I think that that's how we're called to be in the world. We don't always have to agree. We don't always have to see things the same way, but we're supposed to be about loving people in the world. And there's a minister friend of mine that years and many, many years ago, at the time, a super brave sermon that he preached, and he talked about welcoming. He was talking about welcoming people in the LGBTQ community, but he started with a story about somebody with an innie belly button and somebody with an outie belly button, and that they discovered this. These two kids discovered this together, and then other people impressed on them that, oh, that kind of belly button isn't right, and this kind of and then and then somebody wise came along and said, that's just how some of us have innies and some of us have outies or whatever. And you could use any metaphor you wanted to, but it's a way of saying, like, we're all different, and everybody has value to God, and everybody is created uniquely in God's image. And we really just ought to be about loving people. And if that's what we were about, we wouldn't have time for the rest of this nonsense.
I think that's a great transition to this question about, so there's this bill that's coming up in Oklahoma that would protect conversion therapy under the grounds of religious freedom. So this bill basically says that parents and religious therapists, religious practitioners like priests can provide conversion therapy or reparative therapy services to young people under 18 because it is their religious freedom. And we cannot outlaw conversion therapy in Oklahoma because it is a religious right. So we ask this to every participant. What is your response to this as a religious leader?
So I'll start with my response as a citizen. I have made my viewpoints on this known to the people who represent me in the state of Oklahoma. I think the bill is cruel. I think it's oppressive. I think that it is harmful. And this doesn't follow the science. We hear a lot about, we talk a lot about science now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and, argue a lot about, are you going to follow the science, or are you going to follow just how something feels, that kind of thing. But here's the root of this is that this is another example in my mind of people using religion to hurt other people. And I think it troubles me because in so many places in this country, the religious right is taking this time in our nation and this opportunity in our nation to author a lot of bills that are harmful to other people under the guise of religious freedom. But the problem is that they're assuming that their religion is the only religion, the only way. And, the whole idea of, we're a Christian nation, which is not true. We're a nation of all different faith traditions and no faith tradition. But even if it were true, I don't subscribe or believe in their brand of Christianity. And if I thought God was as small as they seem to think God is, I would quit my job today and not serve that God. And so for me, I think, this is an opportunity for all of us. You asked me what allies about allyship a little while ago. Here's an opportunity to be an ally, this, you may not understand this bill as something that will directly affect people that you love. I would say for all of us, that's not true. I think whether people know it or not, they know people who will be deeply negatively affected by this bill. And my personal opinion and my official opinion from the pulpit is that this bill is cruel and oppressive and should not be signed into law.
So I absolutely agree and concur. I'm feeling definitely a certain sort of way about this because a lot of the time when we talk about conversion therapy in Oklahoma, a lot of people are like, what, conversion therapy? Nobody does that anymore. That's something that's an old school thing. What people may not know is that we do get calls about folks who are in danger, young people who are in danger of going to conversion therapy. And there are 3 camps, not in Oklahoma, that are nearby Oklahoma, that are active conversion therapy camps that we know of that operate, and that have kids who are from Oklahoma in them right now. And it's terrifying. And it's terrifying as someone who is LGBTQ. It's terrifying as a parent. And it's terrifying as a person who is religious, to think that this practice is done in the name of parenting, is done in the name of faith, and that this practice is done in the name of being good for the LGBTQ population. Mm-hmm. Because none of those things are accurate or true.
I agree with you completely. And I think that in some respects, it is used, conversion therapy and the threat of conversion therapy and fear of conversion therapy is used to silence and squelch members of the LGBTQ community, young people who are afraid to come out to their family, yes, to their friends, to the, and for every day that people live in fear of being who they really are, it is more and more dangerous for them because it's soul sucking. It is soul sucking to have to be somebody that you're not. And the fear of conversion therapy and the fear of, most of us can't even imagine being shipped off away from our family, but it's, and exactly what you said, it seems like such a far-fetched, antiquated thing for most of us, but it's so real, and it's such a real fear. And to have it sort of casually tossed about and talked about in religious circles as if this is one more thing, like choosing to send your child to a Catholic school, like those are all the same things, like, and that's what's so disturbing about the whole thing. It's, making the choice, I don't want my child to celebrate Christmas. Those are all choices that are our religious freedom choices, but this is dangerous. We're getting ready to put a sign in our church yard that they dropped off today about April being Child Abuse Prevention Month, and this is in my opinion is abuse, and we wouldn't allow it in any other, cloaked any other way. We wouldn't allow it.
I think many of us are afraid to name and say, especially in Oklahoma, religious abuse, because it is kind of a tricky thing. that is, steeped in the idea of religious culture. But it is a very real thing, and conversion therapy is absolutely a form of abuse, and specifically of religious abuse.
And
And
sadly,
mhm.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, well, just if you have been if you're a survivor of conversion therapy and of religious abuse, we absolutely have resources for you at the center, and you're more than welcome to reach out to us and talk with us, and we are here for you.
I love the work that the Equality Center does. When I moved here 4 years ago, and realized very, very quickly about the work that y'all do. And I have so much respect, and we are grateful here in Bartlesville that you're so close, that we can, that your resources are in so many ways our resources. And we appreciate that so much. I was thinking about, in terms of religious abuse, I think, I do a lot of pastoral counseling with members of the LGBTQ community, most of whom are attending other churches here in town with their families, and are being given a very different message about their worth through the pulpit, through the teaching of their church, and have kind of sought me out as a safe person to talk to. And one of the things I hear all the time is that they've been told their whole life that people in the LGBTQ community are going to hell. And I put that in the same category, religious abuse. I mean, to look at somebody and tell them that the way that they were created by God somehow condemns them to some awful thing eternally is abusive. And sadly, those of us who are part of more progressive traditions that are welcoming and open, that seems so far away to us. But again, it's right here. It's right here in our community, and it's being talked about in pulpits every single Sunday.
Definitely. And the thing is that I think some people don't realize is that the words that are said and the phrases that are used all the time, they stick with you. The common verses, the common things, love the sinner, hate the sin, all that stuff, it will just eat away at you for a very long time. And even when you go to an open and affirming congregation, if certain passages of the Bible are brought up, or if certain phrases or certain biblical stories are brought up, there are definitely times that I have felt very on guard, even though I know my church is an extremely safe place for LGBTQ plus people. But it's just that hearing those words all the time, hearing certain stories associated with, this is what being a good straight person means, and homosexuality is bad, this is the Proverbs 31 woman,
Yeah.
Definitely a very specific, feeling that you get.
Oh, for sure. And I think, the way in which I can relate to that is in many churches, women are not supposed to be ministers. And so the way that you're describing that you feel about, the Proverbs passage is the way that I feel when somebody recites something from one of Paul's letters that, tries to get women to pipe down in the church. And it varies. And what I recognize is that even though I know that the way I was taught those passages when I was a child and was listening to white heterosexual men in the pulpit all the time, even though I know that is not true, that there is still this, I think, wounded place inside me that when I hear those passages, or when one of my colleagues here in Bartlesville says something derogatory about women in the pulpit, like, it's so easy to go right back to that place of hurt, that place, and it's jolting, and it comes and you unexpectedly, and this weird mixture of fury and sadness, and I think, I say all the time, words matter. Words matter, and any preacher worth their salt ought to be a wordsmith. I get teased mercilessly about being a wordsmith, and I still remember, and I'm embarrassed to say, not that long ago that I switched from saying brothers and sisters to siblings. And I mean, and all of a sudden one day it just sort of hit me upside the head, like, that's, there's a more inclusive way to say this, a way that's not hurtful, a way that's not binary, and I couldn't believe it had taken me so long. But, once I saw it, it's the, when you know better, you do better. And so I'm not, I'm very humble about the fact that I'm still learning, and I'm still figuring out what it means to be an ally, and to get the words right, and to make sure that what I'm saying is not unintentionally hurtful, because whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's still hurtful. But it's work. It's work, and you have to want to. It's be much easier just to be lazy. But
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is a great lead into the next question that I have, which is, what advice would you give the loved one of an LGBTQ plus person who they're having a hard time reconciling the faith and the sexuality? They maybe they want to get it, but they're just having the struggle. They're struggling with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that I would say is that life is full of moments that you'll never get back. And so while people are struggling with, while you're struggling with how to reconcile this, life is moving on, and the person you love is falling in love and getting married and having a family, or the person you love is moving out of your home, or whatever those things are. And we never, ever get these moments back. And so the first thing I would say is, if you're having trouble reconciling it, you can't, like, it's impossible to be about the business of loving somebody and be about the business of, feeling like you have to fit them into the tiny box that you see heaven at. That whole worst scripture passage in the world is the whole narrow gate thing, unless you're going to interpret that narrow gate as the narrow gate of only being about love, which I think is a twist, it's not even really that appropriate. But I mean, my point is that I would encourage them to keep reading, to talk to people who see things differently than they do, but to ultimately trust God. I mean, let your love for this person and your love for God allow you to trust God with them, and stop worrying about, like, just focus on the love part, and not on the, I have to fix this for you, or I have to fix you for this, or just just love people. But I mean, I can't even tell you the number of parents I've had in my office that I've looked in the eye and said, you've got two choices. You can accept your child for who your child was created to be, or you can miss every major event in your child's life forever. So you should choose now. You should choose now that you're not missing a thing, because life is too short.
I think, speaking as someone who had a very difficult-ish time with my family, coming out with a deeply religious family, and still kind of going through some of the extended family part of it. But I think the response, it is a fight between the two basic emotions of like fear and love. And I think all of the fear is built on this myth that God somehow made a mistake. And I just think it's so foundationally opposed to everything that we're taught about how we're created. You know? And it is so interesting to me that I know that fear is such a powerful thing, but I know that love can be so much stronger. And I think you've said so many really wonderful things that I want to record and send to my extended family about some of this. Because it is extremely difficult, and your LGBTQ plus family knows that it is hard for you, as a person of faith, you know. That's why I definitely feel that the faith, these myths that perpetuate within our faiths about sexuality, have to be busted, and we have to get our churches to become affirming, and become really more than affirming, become radically welcoming and inclusive, because that's really what's going to be what kicks this in the can, you know.
Well, and I think for our communities to be radically affirming and welcoming is the thing that will be the accurate reflection of who God is. Like if the church or the faith community is supposed to be a reflection of who God is, then we don't have any choice. We have to be welcoming, and we have to be affirming. And I think for so many people and in so many circumstances in the world, we just really make God so very small. You know, all we know is our human experience. And so we try to put God into our human understanding. But I think God's love is more than we can imagine. I think God's inclusion is more than we can imagine. And so you're absolutely right that this is all fear-based, and it's stunning considering the number of times in the Bible we're told not to be afraid. But I joke in my congregation around Christmas time every year that, like, the angel appears on scene and it, fear not. And, who has ever been told not to be afraid and that's worked? It doesn't work. We're told not to be afraid, and we're generally afraid anyway. But what makes me sad is when we're afraid of what God thinks or what God will do. And I think that must be really, really disappointing to God for us to be afraid. I don't think God wants us to be afraid. I think God wants us to love and to trust that God is going to love all of us in the best possible way, in ways we can't even imagine. And we should just kind of be along for the ride in that love.
I think that is a fantastic, fantastic note to end on for tonight. I want to make sure that people know where to find you if they're in Bartlesville. So if you want to give a plug for your church, yourself,
Sure. So we are in Bartlesville. We're at 5800 Douglas Lane. We have Facebook. We're on Facebook. Our worship services are live on Facebook at 10:15 every Sunday. And we are, we have a social media presence. We have Instagram and all that stuff. And you can reach me through Facebook, through my personal Facebook page, or through the churches, of course. And we really mean what we say. All means all. You're welcome here.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week. We have Rabbi Lily Kowalski joining us from Temple Israel next week. I'm Morgan Allen White, and I'm the Center Director here at Oklahomans for Equality. You can find us at okeq.org, and you're already here on our Facebook page, so make sure you have liked us and you follow us. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.